Hey everybody, welcome back to Jay's Fifth Down, the NFL podcast. I'm your host, Jay and Gay. And today on the podcast, I have with me Will McFadden. He's the writer with the Falcoholic. Also, I Bleav, hosts his own podcast. So, I appreciate you joining us today, Will.
Yeah, no problem at all, Jaden. Thanks for having me on.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. So, before we get into the podcast, I want to make sure everybody, please like, subscribe, and comment to this video. It's going to be on YouTube, so you guys can check that out when we post it. But, Well, first off, man, how you doing, man? How's everything going?
Oh, I can't complain. Really, I wish kind of the weather was colder.
Right.
I'm more of a cold weather
Right.
kind of person. I say that because I'm currently sitting outside in shorts, and it is in the middle of damn December. But no, man, I'm doing well. How are you doing?
I'm doing pretty good, man. I'm doing well. Doing pretty good. I can't complain, man. Can't complain.
Good to hear.
Yes, sir. So, can you tell us a little bit about yourself? So our viewers get to know you better.
Yeah, absolutely. So I grew up in Atlanta. Unfortunately, not born here, but essentially my entire life.
Right.
Grew up in Marietta. So just up 400 from Atlanta, and big Atlanta sports fan. I went to the University of Georgia.
Okay.
Played a lot of sports in high school. Always kind of wanted to do something in sports, but I was also I like to read, I like to write, I was pretty creative, all that stuff. So paired that together and got into writing and journalism when I was entering my junior year there at Georgia, and they have a fantastic journalism program. Shout out the greatest school of journalism. So it all kind of made sense. I found some opportunities to kind of start writing and developing that skill, which is something I would definitely suggest to anybody out there who is interested in journalism. I mean, it was at the time, and it still is evolving. I think we have a clear picture of the way that it is evolving.
Right.
This conversation is just one small example of that fact, but it has been, and I think it still is, a medium that is pretty accessible early on. Because really, if you like sports journalism, and for some people who are out there who are just passionate about, I guess, journalism as an entity, fairness, equality, all of that, objective storytelling, those people are out there. But if you like sports journalism, it's probably because you just love talking about sports, and you've got opinions, you've got thoughts,
Right.
you wanna share them. You start doing that as early as you can. I remember in high school writing for a small little kind of almost magazine pamphlet thing that got circulated to all of the high school football stadiums kind of in our region,
Right.
each season. And I just started writing for that and doing little synopses of teams. So that's kind of how I got into really writing. And then I was fortunate enough to land with the AJC out of college, start working with Chris Kirshner, who covers the Atlanta Hawks for The Athletic, Jeff Schultz, guys like that, Chip Towers, Seth Emerson, and got really kind of like a great firsthand lesson in the real world of covering sports for a newspaper. From there, I went over to Saturday Down South, and got to kind of really explore with some creativity and finding my voice more as a writer, and then ultimately ended up with the Atlanta Falcons as their primary beat reporter for the last 4 years. And now I am over with the great team at the Falcoholic and get to host my own podcast with Ovi Mahaley, which has been a new and unique and awesome experience so far. So.
Like I said, I listen to your podcast of OVO every week. It's a really good podcast, man. You guys do a great job.
I appreciate that.
It's, I guess, the combination of Ovi's, personality and your, the enthusiasm. Then of course your your personality as well just makes for a fun podcast. So you guys really harp down every week. So I just wanted to say kudos to you guys for making those great episodes for us listeners.
Well, I really appreciate that, and I mean, I think the kind of the part that I really enjoy, it's the part that I enjoyed, and still do enjoy about journalism, and it's like I've always approached the game where I want to learn as much about this sport from the people who do it for a living, and so anytime, like Ricardo Allen was always my favorite go-to interview in the locker room during open locker room period, and he was a student of the game, and he didn't mind sitting there and pulling out his tablet or I guess Microsoft Surface. Sorry, NFL sponsorship team, and just pulling up a play and being like, no, like here's what happened, and so that's the stuff that I'm interested in, and Ovi kind of gives me another window into that player mindset, and that's why each week I try to always find some questions, find an angle to the game where it's like, as a player, what are you guys talking about in the locker room? Like you're about to face a team that like the Lions in a couple of weeks.
Yeah.
That team's won one game. Like, what is that conversation? I'm fascinated by that. Are they just sitting there being like, well, this is going to be a win? I mean, like, do you see the players on that team? Or is it kind of a little more like, I don't know, sports movie-esque, where the coach is kind of like, no, you can't look over these guys. And, the players are all buying in and doing all that, like no trap game type of deals. Ovi can answer those questions, which is the dynamic of that podcast I find personally the most interesting.
Right. Yes. And it's, like I said, a really great podcast. And for those who don't know, Ovi, he played, he played in the NFL. He also played for the Atlanta Falcons for some time, as well as the Baltimore Ravens. So he's a shout out to Ovi, man. He was a great fullback, great player in the NFL, all pro. Yes. So I wanted to ask you, man. So how would you say, over the last couple of years, we've obviously been dealing with the COVID virus, right? So how would you say that affected you and your profession, but also personally as well? Because again, it tremendously, impacted all of us in the whole world, as we, obviously everything was shut down for a minute, and school was online. It was just a lot to process. So talk about how that really affected you and your position.
When I saw this question on the outline, it was interesting. I had to think about how to answer it, because in a lot of ways I was affected in almost every way, or at least could speak to pretty much any of the ways. I outside of, thank God, getting COVID, which I have not. Vaccinated. Encourage everybody to do what they can to secure the health of everybody else. But I both got to work through the entire 2020 season for an NFL team, which was the only sports league to successfully complete, I guess, its entire slate. Well, I guess college football did as well. So good job, NCAA. But but then I also lost my job at the Falcons because of COVID downsizing within the organization. So it's kind of like I guess first I will speak to what it was like to cover a team in the midst of a pandemic. We were fortunate enough, I would say, at the time, having Dan Quinn and Thomas Dimitroff still there at the start of last season, because there was already a relationship built with those two guys.
Right.
So as we went through all of the background and to, I mean, even to be in a more unique scenario, because I'm talking about this from like a media perspective, but some of the Atlanta Falcons communications staff were my closest friends in our digital team, and they were the ones directly in charge of figuring out, okay, well, what are the social distance policies? How can we have media at practice to cover practice, training camp, what are the protocols? How do we make sure? So going through all of that stuff and the tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, the tracers, we had to walk through all of that. And that was fascinating. I mean, in one sense, it's really did kind of hinder and cripple, I think, a reporter's ability to uncover interesting stories.
Right.
I think we're seeing recently a big pivot more towards analytical data driven film review types of pieces. One of that, I think, is audiences have just shown a little bit more of an interest. We're kind of like in a time like Moneyball, the movie.
Yeah.
Like people are just fascinated, like I just said, about like, how does this game work? How do you be really good at it? Sean McVay, Kyle Shanahan, like, how do they do it? All of that stuff. But the other part of it is I think there's just a little bit less access to players, to being face to face with somebody, sitting down and getting, a coffee with somebody and just kind of talking, seeing where the conversation goes, uncovering different little nuances of a player's personality, of, a story that somebody remembered. Like, those moments are really, really the things that people, like, you remember a story that makes you kind of feel something, or that makes, you can tell, like, bringing up a story or recalling a certain memory invoked an emotion in the player.
Right.
And that's just hard to get when you're over a Zoom call.
Yeah,
like,
it is. It is.
It was so weird because you can't just like I remember it really, they started really cutting down the number of questions people could ask for the sake of time. And it just went in a pecking order instead of somebody kind of being like, oh, well, actually, no, like, I want to follow up on that question, like pull that thread a little bit more. It was like, nope, if that was your second question, we're moving on to the next person.
Right.
So that was a challenge, and it still remains a challenge, and it's why, I hope locker room access kind of goes back to normal. But,
Yeah.
but yeah, no, I mean, so professionally, from that standpoint, like, that was fascinating and really an experience. And covering the games from home, like, all of that was different. But then, yeah, I mean, it also impacted me in the biggest possible way professionally, because I ended up, ultimately kind of losing my job with the Falcons because of the pandemic, because, of the stadium being shut down, not available to the public, all of the concerts, different entertainment events, things like that. So, yeah, it was kind of definitely eye-opening to see kind of both sides of that experience.
Yeah, I can only imagine that. And for me, Will, it was just because when COVID first hit, I was in my second semester of my junior year in high school. So and then obviously, we're having to go online and everything. It was just craziness. I mean, it was what it was. But we had to go online and Zoom, like you said, Zoom calls and all those things like that.
And I mean, at one point, my boss got COVID and was out for kind of a week and a half, like a week or two, was quarantining, isolating, all that stuff. So I mean, yeah, like it we were fortunate it didn't really like run through the Falcons organization.
Right.
But I definitely, I mean, the last year is something I don't think I'll be forgetting anytime soon.
Yeah, me and you both, and I think everybody else in the whole world will. But yeah, man, yeah, it was some trying times, man. It still is, obviously. So everybody who's listening, please stay safe. Do what you have to do. Please, because this is important. And we don't know when it's going to go away, so hopefully it will soon. But thank you for your insight on that, Will, because I just find it interesting. Obviously from the players, we saw how that affected them and the whole league itself. But then behind the scenes, with the reporters and the media, the journalists, and everything like that, I can only imagine how challenging it was for you guys, as you said, going through the midst of that, because the way your job works is now changed. It's different than what you're normally used to. So I can only imagine how that affected you. So I appreciate that insight, man. Now, so we can understand how difficult that process was for you to go through. So,
No, yeah, definitely. I mean, it's crazy because I remember my wife and I went on a trip to Paris, kind of like the week that if you remember the Rudy Gobert NBA interview when he kind of wiped the microphones, like we landed back from Paris that night. And so it was the same night that they imposed kind of like the travel ban and all that stuff. So when we landed, our phones kind of like blew up and all of that. But right before that week we went to Paris was the NFL Combine. And so I remember being in Indianapolis, like kind of already knowing about COVID, already knowing about like the coronavirus and, listening to like the Daily and all that stuff and kind of getting updates and checking the CDC tracker, all that good stuff.
Right.
And because I felt like I was a little bit more on high alert than a lot of people because we were going to Paris and it started out kind of largely overseas. But I was like, well, we're going overseas, so I need to be aware of this.
Right.
And yeah, I just remember being in Indianapolis, coincidentally, the last time that I, have attended the Combine, and just being like, are we still going to be able to go to Paris? Am I even safe getting on a plane home?
Right.
Like, what is all of this? And if you think about just like how much things have changed from this was February of 2020 to now, I mean, obviously that type of event didn't happen earlier this year, but like, are we going to see almost like that level of access again? Now that one's a little bit different because the NFL is turning it into an event in and of itself in the calendar year. So like they're going to want the coverage, but yeah, I mean, that's just how much coronavirus has like changed the game.
Yeah, absolutely. Yep. So, but we'll talk about, man. So the Falcons right now currently sit at 6-7. Well,
Yep.
It's been a interesting year to say the least for Atlanta. So what would you say your thoughts on the team, up to this point, like, as far as the emergence of star rookie Kyle Pitts and, the offense, Matt Ryan, those guys, and the defense as well under Arthur Smith and this new coaching staff?
Yeah, so I think that first off, organizationally, I think they've done a really good and underrated job. I think that obviously like the signing of Cordero Patterson is without a doubt like one of the biggest signings of this offseason.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
I mean, like he's the single most, I think, valuable contract in the league if you look at the production for what they're paying him.
Yeah.
And that was the thing we identified with Terry Fontenot throughout the process. I say we as somebody who writes for the team, not the team itself. I was in no way, shape, or form part of any of those conversations. But the thing that stood out about him was his ability to find players like DeMario Davis or like Marcus Williams or somebody, or Malcolm Jenkins. Sorry, not Marcus Williams. These veteran free agents who other teams were overlooking, or maybe didn't value for the price tag, but they were kind of like the mid-tier expensive, mid-tier priced free agents who weren't going to break the bank, but brought more value than what you were going to pay them. And he crushed that this first time around. Now you could argue the other side of that with Mike Davis, and you could say, well, you brought him in here to be your number one, but it's not like they didn't even pay him what I think they paid Todd Gurley last year. So like, what are we talking about here?
Right.
And I just think that if you look at kind of the core of this team, we've got the mainstays who we've been talking about for the last 3-4 years or whatever, like your Grady Jarrett's, like your Deion Jones, Matt Ryan, Jake Matthews. But a lot of the identity, the core of this team have been your Deron Harmons, your Eric Harris is. I think that we're starting to see the defensive line get an influx of some no-name players or new name players, I guess I should say, like Anthony Rush or Jonathan Bullard, guys who haven't been around here. And so we're slowly seeing that the additions the Falcons made were clearly made with a reason. And now that payoff is starting to happen. And
yeah,
I predicted this team to be a 7-10 team before the season. I still think there's a chance that was spot on. I didn't really look. I don't go game by game. Like, I'm not just too many things change throughout a season for that to be like a really accurate depiction. I just kind of look at the talent and kind of say, well, this seems like a 7-10 team to me.
Yeah.
And it could be, but I think the fact that they've already got 6 wins with 4 games to play is probably a better statement than any I could make about, how ahead of schedule this team is. Because I do think before the season, a 7-win team was, frankly, maybe a little bit gracious. And certainly I don't think far off. But I think knowing what I know now, I don't know if I would say 7-10 as my prediction. And I think that's a real testament to what Arthur Smith has gotten in terms of kind of like the mentality that he wants this team to have and the buy-in of the players to make that happen.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And you touched on that. The fact that, Arthur Smith and just the sense of urgency I think this team is having. Now, it was lacking a little bit earlier in the year. But as of late, the last couple of games, they've been playing. It seems like they've been playing more hard. The more of a sense of urgency, and that's what you want to see week in and week out, especially from Arthur Smith's perspective as the head coach. And then GM Terry Fontenot, all those guys. And I mean, quite frankly, we got to give Arthur Smith some credit here because, like you said, I mean, what he came in with. Will, I mean,
he's done it without Calvin Ridley.
Yeah,
too.
yeah.
I mean, like if you had told me before the year Calvin Ridley is playing like 4 games this season, I'm automatically knocking that 7-10 becomes a 5-12 real quick.
Right.
So I think that's a huge testament, and that what it is it just seems like something that's so underrated. And I kind of touch on this a lot with Ovi, and this is one of my sticking points. I think is just like a personal philosophy, but like fans underrate, I think, the amount that the NFL is a relationship business. Coaching is a relationship business. We talk a lot about schemes. We talk a lot about X's and O's. Arthur Smith has, from the beginning, said, we want to find out who wants to play here, who wants to win, who's willing to do what it takes to win. They're not shy about putting those guys on the field, whether or not they're household names or the 53rd man on the roster. If that's the guy who's feeling it that day, and that gives them their best chance to win, that's who they're going with. And I kind of feel like that's the mentality that's affected this team, impacted this team. But sometimes it just takes a little bit of time for the coaches to understand who those players are. And that relationship, that time that it takes for the coaches to figure out their players is something that I don't think the NFL world kind of talks enough about. We talk about like a new player impacting a team, all of that stuff. But coaches are just like all of us. When they're not there, when they're not doing it day to day, interacting with that person, like anytime you start a new job, you go to a new school, you are in a new environment, it takes a second, it takes a certain amount of time to kind of feel it out, figure it out, understand what is true, what's false, what was gossip, what's real, like all of this stuff. And I think that is where you're seeing a team like the Falcons now really start to understand what they have, what their identity is, and they're playing their best football right now as a result of that.
Yeah, absolutely, man. You're right, and like that is a aspect of the game, like you said, that most people, in NFL world don't really get, except for guys like you, that you're around this, you have to cover this, so you understand it, man. But yeah, I mean, ever since the loss to Philly in the opener, man, I didn't have it was my hopes for the team kind of derailed after that, but
Wow, one and done,
right,
one game and done over here.
right. But but despite the fact that they have not won a single game at home, yet they're 4-2 on the road, and they're still in the playoff conversation. It's just, I mean, amazing to me because honestly, if this was last year's regime, I don't think that's not the case. So I do have to credit to Arthur Smith and Terry Fontenot. I just think for bringing in a new overall sense of urgency and new sense of urgency into the building, and new identity. So, and I think, and Kyle Pitts, I mean, he's going to be a gem for this team. I really do Bleav that. It's going to take him some time. People can't rush him. You got to understand, like this. Yeah, he's one of the generational talents. Yes, we took him at the 4th pick, but he's like every other rookie. He's not going to come out the gates just smoking. Like, that's not realistic for any rookie. I'm sure.
I remember. Yes, let's do the Kyle Pitts conversation, because I remember having. I think it was with Mike Mularkey. I Bleav that's who this was with. But it may have been Austin Hooper. It may have been the assistant tight ends coach. I'm blanking on his name right now, but. Anyway, it was that obviously Mike Mularkey, former NFL tight end, longtime tight ends coach, head coach, really accomplished dude in the NFL, said that tight end is, outside of quarterback, he believes like the most complicated position to learn, because you have to know kind of all parts of the offense. And if you're a receiver, you really kind of just need to know the receiving plays. Like, you're out on an island for run blocking, unless it's like a toss sweep or a screen or something. Probably don't have a huge role in that. If you're a tight end, I mean, you're the knight on the chessboard. You're the rook. You're one of these pieces that can be moved all around, and your versatility is a huge benefit. But if your mental versatility is not up to the task as much as your physical versatility, it doesn't matter. And I think something that, across the board, we don't probably pay enough attention to or talk about enough in the draft process is the mental readiness, just the understanding. Like, it gets talked about with quarterbacks, but that's kind of the only position that it does. And yes, Kyle Pitts physically, he fits. I mean, he belongs. He makes sense. Yeah, I look at him. I think NFL player. Cool. That checks out. Like, that doesn't take that much brain power to figure out. But just, what type of role are they able to give him? What is he ready to take on? How complicated is Arthur Smith, another former tight ends coach? So, like, he's learning from somebody who knows what he's doing. He knows the position. I think that it is telling that the Falcons haven't just kind of Deebo Samuel this season for Kyle Pitts and made him like, we're getting you the ball 12 times a game no matter what type of deal.
Yeah.
I think that does speak to the learning curve that position presents. That being said, our expectations were, I tried to be really resistant to this because I was aware that expectations were like skyrocketing to this guy. He's still 3rd in the league right now among all tight ends behind Mark Andrews and Travis Kelce in terms of receiving yards.
Right.
This dude is playing out of his mind.
Yeah.
It's just that he doesn't already have like 1,500 yards. So we're all kind of like, Kyle Pitts, like, are we sure this worked out? It's like, meanwhile, he's 24th in the like entire league in receiving yards as a rookie tight end.
Yeah.
On an offense that's not really like the most explosive offense in the league, if we're being honest. And he's only getting like 4 targets a game. So I don't even really know what the Kyle Pitts conversation is about. he's playing really well, and we should just enjoy this. Sure, he may not be like, I don't know, Lil Wayne, like I Am a Martian kind of from outer space yet, but he'll get there because he's.
Yeah, man, like you alluded to, man. Yeah, Kyle Pitts, man, he is just playing really well, especially for a rookie his age. But also, like you also mentioned, Will, we can't just come out expecting that he's gonna just break open like he's like how the 49ers use Deebo Samuel, like you alluded to right out the bat, just like in the backfield.
And like tight ends have to block and stuff as well. Like, I mean, he's doing they are, and I didn't even mention, I mean, let alone what I said about all of the tight end kind of difficulties of that unique position mentally. This dude is truly like a slash player in the way that, we all kind of talk about Cordero Patterson as like a running back / wide receiver. The dude's like a 10-year veteran in this league. He's had plenty of time to learn the nuances of playing wide receiver to focus on playing running back this year. So it's all second nature to him. Kyle Pitts is kind of learning how to play tight end and wide receiver all in the span of 1 year and kind of accomplishing and succeeding at that. So maybe I need to be a little less harsh on Kyle Pitts is kind of, I think, where I'm arriving at the end of my my monologue on this rookie tight end who is playing really well this year.
Right. Yes. So shout out to Kyle Pitts, man, for coming in, and he's having a great year. But overall, man, yeah, that wraps us up for today on the podcast. Will, but I appreciate your insight, man, and you coming on and talking some Falcons ball with us and sharing a little bit about your background. I appreciate that. And just one final question for you, Will, before we go off here. Playoffs or no playoffs for the Atlanta Falcons, my friend?
Oof. I wish you were asking me on Sunday evening. I'd have a much better answer. So, I mean, there's no way. Like, what's going to break first? The Falcons' home losing record streak that they're on, or the Lions, one win record that they have. I feel like that's a win next week. If they win on Sunday against San Francisco, I mean, they're maybe not in the driver's seat, but they're at least like straddling the center console and like inching towards the driver's seat. So I'm going to be an optimist, and I'm going to say yes because I have a good feeling about this game on Sunday. I just kind of think that they're due. They've been knocking at the door. I think the 49ers are coming off of a big win against Cincinnati. Atlanta has something to prove still. So, yes, I'm going to say that they get the win on Sunday and they make the playoffs.
Okay, that was very bold statement there. I know if Ovi was here, he probably would say, William,
what are you doing?
Yeah. Like, what are you doing, man? Like, you said this just gonna say this team's gonna make the playoffs, man. But
nah, man.
Yeah, man.
That's what I would say.
Yeah. I can't give an exact answer right now, man. It's just maybe, man. I don't know, man. It did, like you said, depends. I think this is the de facto playoff game right here for the Falcons against the 49ers, because pretty much if you lose this, you're done for the year. Pretty much. So, that's no pressure on the Falcons, but but that wraps us up for today on the podcast. Appreciate you guys listening. Please subscribe, comment, and also check out Will and Ovi's podcast, Bleav in Falcons. You can find that, Bleav, on Spotify. What other podcast platforms, Will, can we find you guys on?
Yeah, I mean, really pretty much anywhere. It's BLEAV in Falcons. And yeah, we've got recaps of the game up early Monday mornings, and then kind of previews that go out Friday afternoons. So yeah, again, I think Ovi, getting a former player's perspective is just some unique analysis that I think that adds a lot of value to that show.
Oh yeah, absolutely, man, absolutely. But yeah, man, I appreciate you coming on today, Will. It was great hearing from you, man, getting your insight again with the Falcons and everything like that. So you have a great day, man. I appreciate your time.
Yeah, no problem, Jay. Anytime. It was great to talk some Falcons football with you, man.
Yes, sir. All right, take it easy, man.
You too.